Empire.
Welcome to Inside the Cap. I'm your host, Joel Corey. You can find me on Twitter at CoreyJoel. That's CorryJoel. And also read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take on NFL Salary Cap and Contract Matters. This week we're going to take a look at two things. How NFL players get paid in the postseason and a situation the Dallas Cowboys don't have to deal with. What if Dak Prescott had played the 2021 season on a second franchise tag? First, we're going to turn to playoff pay. Playoff pay is something that I had to pay attention to when I was an agent because it was inevitable that each postseason the client that was going to be playing in the playoffs would call me and ask, how does it work? How do I get paid? First thing, a lot of players thought that they were going to get paid their weekly salary during the postseason. Not true. Playoff money is a benefit under the collective bargaining agreement, and there's a pool of money which comes from the league office that is how players are paid. Now, this year in 2021, in the wild card round, the division winners got $42,500. The other wild card participants got $37,500. The two teams with the wild card buys, the Green Bay Packers and the Tennessee Titans, also got $37,500. Under the previous CBAs, the wild card buys got nothing for the wild card round, so they would practice all week, do nothing, so basically they work for free. In this round, the divisional playoff round, it's $42,500. Conference championship game, $65,000. The Super Bowl winner gets $150,000. The losing team gets $75,000. Now, that means the Dallas Cowboys, as a division winner, their players got $42,500 for their exit in the wild card round. The Arizona Cardinals, Las Vegas Raiders, New England Patriots, Philadelphia Eagles, Pittsburgh Steelers didn't win divisions. They lost. They're at $37,500. This means that the San Francisco 49ers, as a non-division winner who advanced to the divisional playoffs, the Packers and the Titans are short of $80,000 regardless of the outcome of this game in playoff money. And the Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Los Angeles Rams players are getting $85,000 no matter what. The max that anyone can make on one team is $300,000. That would have to be from one of those five teams I just mentioned that won in the wild card as division winners. San Fran players, Packers, Titans players, max they can make is $295,000 for the playoffs. Now, for a lot of players, playoff money is a huge pay cut, and you're not playing for the playoff money, you're playing for the ring, obviously. But we'll take Jimmy Garoppolo, for instance. Jimmy Garoppolo had the biggest base salary during the regular season of $24.1 million, and players earn 1/18 the salary during the regular season, 17 games in the bye week. So he was making about 1.4 during the regular season, 1.4 million during the regular season. That's what he was earning. Now his punter, Mitch Wisnowski, is making $850,000 as his base salary for 2021. That's a little over $47,000 per week. They're making the same thing each playoff game. And if you really look at it, that if you took what you make in the divisional playoff round and extrapolate that out for a season, that'd be $765,000 of salary. The only minimum base salary that is less than that is for incoming players, rookies. Their minimum base salary is $660. For a 2-year player, it's $850. So that kind of underscores where playoff money is. Now, who's eligible? For the wild card and divisional playoff games, players who are on the 53-man roster and injured reserve at game time get paid for those games. Practice squad players don't get playoff money. They still receive their weekly salary as long as their team remains in the playoffs. That's $9,200 per week for most practice squad players. There's another group of practice squad players, longer vets, depending upon their years of service, long-term vets. They get $14,000 a week. Now, the CBA allows you to expand the 53-man roster to 55. You can elevate 2 practice squad players for each regular season or postseason game. The elevated players get paid the amount like the guys on the 50-man roster. Some will actually play in the game. There's a interesting quirk this year that we saw last year as well with Jared Veldheer. Zach Kerr from the Arizona Cardinals had been on the 50-man roster. Then right after the regular season ended, they released him. Then he cleared waivers, and they put him back on the practice squad. Now, they elevated him for the drubbing they took from the Rams Monday night. So he got $37,500 playing for the Cardinals. Now, as a practice squad player, your contract expires once your team is eliminated from the playoffs or the regular season ends if they don't make the playoffs. So he's now a free agent. Because of Cincinnati's injuries on the defensive line, he signed with Cincinnati Bengals this week and is on the 53-man roster. So he is going to make $42,500 from the Cincinnati Bengals to play this week after making $37,500 for the Arizona Cardinals. So that's a interesting quirk that you don't see too often. Now, once you get to the conference championships and the Super Bowl, it gets a little different in terms of who's eligible. It's more convoluted. If you're on the 50-man roster when the game has been played and you were on the roster for at least 3 previous games, regular season or playoffs, you get the full amount. So in Zach Kerr's case, if Cincinnati advances, beats the Titans, they get to the AFC championship game, he's not getting the full amount. I'll get to what he's going to get later. Now, if you are a veteran who has at least 1 year of service and you're put on injured reserve during the regular season and you're still under contract when the game is played, you get the full amount. Same goes for veterans with at least 4 more years of service that were put on IR in the preseason and are still under contract. Then you still get the same amount. And then there's another category. Players who aren't on the 50-man roster at game time that spent at least 8 games, regular or postseason, on the roster, and they're not under contract to another team, they get paid too. Now, under that 4th category, that's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown was on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 53-man roster for 12 games before he imploded. So Antonio Brown will get the same amount as Tom Brady if Tampa Bay gets by the Rams, gets to the NFC Championship game. Should they repeat as champions, he's going to get the same money for those games as Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and anybody else who's a former teammate. So that's $65,000 he gets next week if Tampa Bay beats the Rams and they're in the NFC Championship game. Then if they win the Super Bowl, he gets another $150,000. So he can make $215,000. Antonio Brown can. Dre Kirkpatrick, cornerback who was with the San Francisco 49ers, same thing. Same position as Antonio Brown. If San Francisco beats Green Bay because he was on the Niners for 8 games, he'll earn $215,000 if the Niners win the Super Bowl. Josh Reynolds was on the Tennessee Titans before he was for 9 games before he was released and claimed by the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, NFC team, AFC team Titans. So Titans get to the Super Bowl and win. That's $215,000 for Josh Reynolds. Another thing about this, the payment eligibility. Tre'Davious White, who tore his ACL in a November game, tore the left ACL, and Chris Godwin, who in early December tore the ACL and MCL in his right knee. They're still going to get the same amount as their teammates for these games because of their years of service, and they're still under contract and they're put on IR, so they're still going to get paid too. Now, there's one other interesting category that I became aware of long time ago because I had a player who was on an AFC team in the playoffs but had been traded from an NFC team back in 2000. This is the only time I've had it apply to me when I was an agent. Had a guy, David Gibson, who was a safety for Tampa. This is Tony Dungy's first year in Indianapolis in 2002. They lose a starting safety. He wanted someone who could step in and play, knew the system. They traded for David Gibson, who was backing up John Lynch. Indianapolis goes to the playoffs, early exit. He gets that money. So I happily surprised him and told him that since he'd been there for a certain amount of time, he was going to get some playoff money for Tampa Bay's win, which he did when they beat the Raiders. Now, there's one guy who fits into that category this year. That is Raiders receiver Deshaun Jackson. He got the $37,500 for playing for the Raiders last week against the Bengals. And he's also in line for the full share, the $65,000 for the NFC Championship game, and $150,000 in a Super Bowl win if the Rams win, because he was with the Rams for 8 games before he got released. So Deshaun Jackson has a reason to be rooting for the Rams. Now, there are players who can get a half share for these 2 games. So if you were on the 50-man roster when the game is played for less than 3 previous games, regular or postseason, you get a half share. So that'd be Zach Kerr. So Zach Kerr, if the Bengals get to the AFC Championship game, gets $32,500 for that game. He's not going to hit the 3 previous game requirement at all, so he'll get a half share for as long as they advance, starting next week. Now, if you are a vet with at least 1 year service and you're put on IR during the regular season and you're still under contract, if you are a first-year player put on injured reserve during the regular season that's still under contract when the game is played, and you signed a player contract the previous year, a practice squad contract in the prior season as well, then you get half amount. If you have 1 to 3 years of service and you're put on IR in the preseason, half amount. And if you are someone who was on the 50-man roster, you're not on the 50-man roster at game time, but you spent 3 to 7 games on the roster, and that's regular postseason, and you're not under contract to another team in the same conference, you get a half share. So the most notable name in that category is Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson, after Derrick Henry was hurt, signed to the practice squad, then quickly signed to the 50-man roster, played 3 games for the Titans. So if the Titans get past the Bengals, insignificant to Adrian Peterson, the money. He was once the highest paid running back in the NFL, averaging over $14 million per year on the contract he signed with the Vikings in 2011, but nonetheless, he'll get $32,500 next week in the AFC Championship game, and if the Titans would win the Super Bowl, that would be $107,500 for Adrian Peterson. So he's a guy who should be rooting for the Titans, and also a teammate of his, offensive lineman that retired after 5 games, Ty Sombrallo, same position. That'd be a nice parting gift for Sombrallo with the Tennessee Titans. Now, occasionally you're going to see individual incentives or performance bonuses in contracts which relate to playoff performance, and there are a couple guys who still have money riding on those. Tom Brady's one of them. He earned all 2.25 million of the incentives that were in his contract last year, and Tampa won the Super Bowl. They're still there. In order to make the incentives not likely to be earned, so they wouldn't count on the cap during the season, and there wouldn't be a cap charge during the season, they had to add a couple of the incentives with a team ranking, which was Tampa Bay improving in average net yards gained per rushing play, which they did. So Brady made $500,000 for Tampa getting to the playoffs, then got another $250 for the wild card game. He had to have a minimum of 75% play time during the regular season and also in the playoff game. Getting to the so it's going to be $1.25 million total if Tampa can win against the Rams, and then it'd be another $500,000 if Tampa got to the Super Bowl, and then he maxes out at $2.25 million if Tampa wins the Super Bowl. The Bucs did something for Ndamukong Suh right after the regular season, so he could still earn his incentives. There's a 65% defensive play time, which was part of his for his $1 million incentives. He didn't play 65% during the regular season. The Bucs had to improve in touchdowns on returns and recoveries, which they did, but it's $200,000 for Tampa making the playoffs because they eliminated the playtime requirement. Then he gets $200,000 for each of the Tampa Bay playoff wins. So he's now short of $400,000 because they've won one game. That's how he could earn his whole million. Odell Beckham Jr., when he signed with the Rams after being released by the Browns, has $3 million of incentives tied to playoff money. He got $500,000 for the wild card win against the Cardinals. There's another $750,000 on the line if the Rams can beat the Buccaneers. Also $750,000 for an NFC Championship game victory. There's another $500,000 just for making it to the Super Bowl, another $500,000 for winning it. So that's how you get his whole $300,000. But there's another requirement which is easy for him to satisfy as well, as long as he's healthy. He has to be on the game day active roster, part of the 53 or 55 man roster, depending upon. I'm assuming they elevate two guys from the practice squad, and be on the field for at least one offensive play. So no problem in that regard. His teammate, offensive lineman Andrew Whitworth, has $1.5 million of incentives based on playoff success. He had to play 65% during the regular season, which he easily exceeded. He got $500,000 for making the playoffs. The one playoff win against the Cardinals is worth another $500,000, so that's $1 million right there. And a Super Bowl victory is worth another $500,000. He also had a salary escalator for 2022. The playtime requirement was 75%, which he's hit. He got $1 million just for the Rams getting to the playoffs, and then another $500,000 for the playoff win. So he's got the full escalator. And there's one more case I want to bring up, and that's Aaron Rodgers. He's got $500,000 worth of playoff incentives, and when they mended his off-season rift with the front office, they reworked his incentives because $850,000 of them were considered likely to be earned because of what happened last year. He had individual incentives as well. That's part of he had $1 million worth of incentives, so that was part of it. So they added a team requirement to all the playoff incentives. And part of the requirement that was already there was for him to have 75.2% of offensive play time during the regular season or more, which he did, and in each playoff contest. Now, then it's $125,000 for each Packers playoff game. But Green Bay also had to improve from the 2020 season in touchdowns on returns and recoveries. They had 2 in 2020. They have 2 in 2021. So he hadn't met that. He hadn't qualified for the incentive. He's going to need the Packers he's going to have to rely on their generosity for them to do something like Tampa Bay did for Ndamukong Suh, for him to earn the incentives. Also, because they were so good and got a wild card bye, wasn't any like catch-all or contingency that he would get the wild card game money for a bye. So he's out that 125 as well. But in order to placate Aaron Rodgers, if he's make sure you don't know what he's thinking. If he is all on board to try to stay in Green Bay, or he still wants to be traded after the season. But I'm going to pay this to him anyway because I don't want to take any chance that $500,000 if they win the Super Bowl, which would be a drop in the bucket for him, could have any role in his decision-making process. But that's just an overview of how playoff money works. And so now you can kind of have an idea to look for Antonio Brown potentially being a Bucks fan because he's going to get money. Deshaun Jackson gets to double dip. Rams fan. And Adrian Peterson, Titans fan. If they continue to advance, he gets a little something as well. Now on to Dak Prescott. The Dallas Cowboys season didn't end the way they wanted to. Don't think I've ever quite seen a playoff game end because of a team taking a risky play with no timeouts and then not being able to kill the clock to get a final playoff when Dallas was driving for the game-winning touchdown. That was not how they wanted the season to end. Caught a nightmare scenario. But they avoided one because Dak Prescott signed a long-term contract. Last March, Dak Prescott became the second highest paid player in the NFL. Signed a 4-year, $160 million contract that's worth up to $164 million with incentives. Had a record $66 million signing bonus. At the time, had the most fully guaranteed at signing at $95 million. Josh Allen has since surpassed it. Had $126 million in guarantees. Nobody's going to begrudge Dak Prescott for taking that deal. Great deal, great structure on his part. Now, personally, I was disappointed because I wanted to see Dak Prescott go to Kirk Cousins' route. Kirk Cousins played under two franchise tags as a Washington football team in 2016 and 17. Then in 2018 became an unrestricted free agent. The Vikings made him the highest paid player in the league at $28 million per year. He got the first fully guaranteed lucrative contract for a veteran. The deal had up to $90 million. It was worth up to $90 million through incentives. So Prescott this year played well overall. He had a mid-season lull, a 6-game stretch where people were wondering whether he was in a slump, and even Jerry Jones didn't dispute that. And that was after he hurt his calf, strained his right calf against the Patriots. But during those 6 games, he's only completing 63.2% of his passes. His passer rating was 82.8, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and Dallas went 3-3. He won 3 NFC Player of the Week awards Offensive Player of the Week awards during the regular season. Nobody else won 3. He had the most. Justin Herbert had the most in the AFC, also 3. But for the season, he ranked near the top of several statistical categories. Third with 104.2 passer rating. Fourth best completion percentage at 68.8%. Threw a franchise record 37 touchdown passes. Also tied for fourth most in the league. And his 4,449 passing yards were 7th in the league. Playoff game, statistically, was the worst one he's ever played. Career low, 53.5% completion percentage. Completed 23 of 43 passes. 69.3% passer rating, his worst in postseason play. And we had Jimmy Johnson, the former Cowboys coach who won 2 championships when Jerry Jones first bought the team, made a comment to a Fox Sports graphic that Tony Romo and Dak Prescott have the same 1-3 record through their first playoff record through their first 6 NFL seasons, and he said a shame. So Cowboys fans probably aren't very high on Dak Prescott, but if he played out his contract, given how he generally played this year, Dallas would have been looking at a third franchise tag for him. He would have played the 2021 season on a second franchise tag, which would have been 120% of his first one of $31.409 million in 2020. The second franchise tag would have been $37,690,080. Third franchise tag, too cost prohibitive, would have been $54,274,752. 44% increase over the 2021 tag. Dallas, as it is right now, has some cap issues. They now have 57 players under contract, but the top 51 count in the offseason. So Dallas has the fourth most cap commitments for the upcoming league year at 230.4 cap commitments. There was $3.96 million of cap room that could be carried over from the 2021 league year, which they did. So basically, right now, Dallas is, according to NFLPA data, $18.285 million over the projected salary cap of $208.2 million. NFLPA and NFL agreed to that as a salary cap ceiling back in May, and then it was announced in December that's where the cap should be. Now, obviously, and this is obviously including Dak Prescott's 2022 base salary. So if you took out his 2022 base salary of $34.45 million, then just reverse engineer it, Dallas would only be about $1.3 million under the cap. So you wouldn't be able. You'd have to do a whole lot of salary cap gymnastics to get that third franchise tag at almost $54.3 million in there. So Dak Prescott would be in the driver's seat. He'd be sitting pretty. And as an agent, I'd be licking my chops to want to deal with that. His agent, Todd France, in this situation would have Dallas over a barrel. So what would I want in a situation like that? Highest paid player in the league right now is Patrick Mahomes at $45 million per year on that 10-year extension he signed in 2020. It's worth up to $475 million with incentives. That's $45 million per year. But that wouldn't be the standard I'd be looking to beat, because the 6-year, $258 million extension that Josh Allen signed back in August, which averages $43 million per year, the first 3 new years in this extension averaged just under $46 million per year. So going the Cousins route, doing the 3-year deal, so I'd have Prescott in a position to hit the open market at 31. I'm going to want to top that Allen number. So I'd be looking, my target for the base value would have been 140 to 145 million on a 3-year deal. So the low end of that averages $46,666,667. The high end of my target price would have been $48,333,333. And there'd also need to be at least $2 million in annual incentives like Cousins had in his deal. So I'm going to top the max value of Allen's deal because he's got $5 million worth of incentives in each of the new years. So the max value is $48 million. If you had to stick dummy contract years in 2025 and 2026 to help for salary cap purposes to stretch out any bonus proration, so be it. Now, what I did as a check is I ran this idea by some current and former NFL executives I trust to get their assessment of my scenario. I talked to one current GM, two other current executives, a former team executive. The only one who would put their name on it wanted to. Obviously, the current executives have to be anonymous because they can't really be talking about stuff like this publicly. Was Joe Banner, the former Eagles president and Browns CEO. when I was an agent, Joe Banner was probably the smartest guy I dealt with from a team perspective. And for those of you who don't know, he's the one who ushered in the whole concept of identifying your core players at the earliest possible instance and then locking them up. And he would also structure the contracts in a way where Philadelphia could get out of the contracts if they made a mistake in terms of identifying a player early. Now, he was instrumental in Philadelphia going to 5 NFC championship games and 1 Super Bowl in an 8-year span in the 2000s. So that's why I wanted to talk to him. Now, consensus opinion I got was the low end of my range, 140 over 3 years, almost $47 million per year, was not off base. Nobody balked at that. Everybody thought that Prescott would be the highest paid player in the league under these circumstances. Nobody thought he was in that top tier of quarterbacks with the Patrick Mahomeses, the Aaron Rodgers, the Tom Bradys, and the Josh Allens, that group. They put him in the next tier. He was consensus considered a top 10 quarterback. Some had him like 7. The least complimentary comment I got about Prescott was he was called a better version of Kirk Cousins. They're all like, hey, Cousins was the highest paid player. This guy's better. What do you think's going to happen? One of the guys said that he'd have so much leverage that basically Dallas would have to just give him a contract to fill out and pay him whatever he wanted. Also posed the idea of fully guaranteed, and fully guaranteeing for 3 years was a lot more receptive, got a lot more traction than fully guaranteeing it for 5 years. That was kind of starting to get a breaking point. Joe Banner wasn't that adverse to 5 years. He did say something interesting that when guarantees would come up with owners, their bigger concern wasn't the actual amount guaranteed. It was that football is such a violent sport that if you guaranteed money for football players, they lose their motivation to play, which to me is insulting because these are highly competitive people that, yeah, that's going to happen for some, but that wasn't going to be the norm. He would have been okay potentially fully guaranteeing all 5 years for Dak Prescott. And he raised an interesting point about Jerry Jones. That if we ever got to the situation, which for Dallas, fortunately they didn't, that Jerry Jones going through those lean years with the Quincy Carters of the world after Troy Aikman retired would not let a quarterback in his prime, and Prescott turns 29 in July, walk out the door. So I also broached the idea of $50 million per year for Prescott. I think we're going to have a $50 million per year quarterback this offseason. I think Aaron Rodgers, if he does what he's done in the past and looks to maximize money, whether he stays in Green Bay or goes someplace else in a trade like Denver, I expect the extension to average $50 million per year or more. If he's still looking to maximize his value, if he goes Tom Brady route, obviously that's not going to happen because Brady's consistently taking hometown discounts except for a deal he did in 2010. 50 for the most part didn't go over too well. $50 million per year, that was a breaking point for current general manager. One team negotiator was like, I'm going to have to spend a whole lot of time on plan B and try to figure out what I realistically can do instead before going there. Banner didn't balk at it. Didn't give me a specific breaking point, but said it was close to it, but it had to be a very aggressive number for him to walk away. His thinking was if you have a really good quarterback, you should have a chance to be right there in the mix every year with a really good quarterback. And one former team executive was thinking along the lines: if you got your franchise quarterback, just take your medicine, pay it, because it's hard to find those guys. Now, also explored how's free agency gonna play out for Dak in this situation, and yeah, the consensus was there's some things in his favor. One, the draft class isn't as strong as it's been in the past 2 years. That would help. You have uncertainty surrounding the trades of Aaron Rodgers. Does Russell Wilson really want out? And then Deshaun Watson's situation would also be helpful. It was unanimous that the Washington football team would make a run at Dak Prescott. Division rival, they need a quarterback. So you get your quarterback stability and you make a team in your division worse. A couple of people suggested that the other teams in the division might go along the same thinking, the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. The two teams which were mentioned most frequently besides Washington, the Broncos and Panthers, who are most likely going to address their quarterback situation this year. Denver for sure will. Panthers don't have an obvious quarterback on the roster, and Matt Rule's on the hot seat. One of the former executives said something really interesting. He said, if players, meaning quarterbacks, were smart, they'd be more like Cousins. That's how to get the best deal financially. It just doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. Some of the reasons were that agents don't necessarily they'll do what's more in their interest and the player's interest. And I'm not suggesting that's what happened with Dak Prescott. I don't think that's what happened, because as an agent, you are supposed to execute your client's wishes. Dak Prescott, lifelong Cowboys fan, wanted to be the Cowboys quarterback, came close to getting the deal done before the July 15th deadline, before he played under the first franchise tag in 2020, ran out of time. So him getting a deal done was expected, and Todd France was executing his client's wishes. So that's not anything I wanted to leave as an impression. Plus, he got a great deal. He also got a no franchise transition tag clause, so he's going to be free anyway at the end of this deal. So if they're going to have to redo it going into year 4, so going into 2024, they'll have to redo his actual deal, and he'll get another extension. So no criticisms at all. Great deal by Dak, but I just really want to see another quarterback embrace the franchise tag like Kirk Cousins. Quarterbacks don't get franchised generally. It's a rarity. I don't know who it might be. Maybe if Jacksonville's still dysfunctional and Trevor Wilson lives up to his potential. I mean, not Trevor Wilson. Trevor Wilson played basketball at UCLA. I'm combining Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence. Maybe it's him. The Bengals are going to have to give on the guarantees for their structure, because they're like Pittsburgh was. No base salary guarantees. So for Joe Burrow, if you want to stick to that, maybe that's a big sticking point in the contract, and he starts playing on the franchise tags, even though he's an Ohio boy. Who knows? but it just, for me, I'd love to see what would happen if you got a great franchise quarterback who was willing to take it to the extreme, get to the point where he could be a free agent, and then what would he force his own team to do, or what would he get in free agency? But who knows when that happens. But anyway, that's it for this week's Inside the Cap. Don't forget, you can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel. That's CorryJoel. And also read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agent Stake. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.